So we've talked about like past experience bias, where what you have been sort of succumbed to in the past has kind of driven some kind of bias, whether it's positive or negative. It depends on each person's sort of individual scenario. Spoken about how thinking things will always be the way they are and making decisions based off that and how that can impact it. The commonality that kind of sits between them all is people's resistance to change, or people's resistance to sort of being accepting of things just being different, right? Like it's like, I don't want things to change. Well, just because you don't want things to change does not mean they're not going to change. I don't want housing prices to stabilize going over $1 million from now. Just please just don't do that because I don't want it. Well, no, you're probably going to have to adapt to some of that change. Was this one of the challenges that you overcame, or was this one thing because of business that you were always adapting to change, of like offshore people, working with offshore staff, moving into the internet with businesses, etc.? Like, was this thing something that you had to learn, or for yourself, was this something that you're like, this is pretty intuitive, I get it?
I think learning where this comes from. So I want you to let's go back in time thousands of years. If you got back when there was like tribes, okay, so we're like cave people in this example, right? If you got excluded from your tribe, you died.
Yep.
Right? That's what happened. So in our like deep psychology, like the old part of our brain, like what is wired in is being different, and getting excluded from your tribe leads to death.
Completely.
Yeah. So what do you think that leads to?
Everyone following the crowd.
Everyone trying to be the same as each other so they don't get excluded.
Yep.
Right. And this is where you hear things like the madness of crowds. So like your very survival depends on you staying in your tribe. And if that changes, like you die. That's what we all have deep within us in the old part of our brain. So if you bring that forward to today, you can see that if you're different than everyone else around you, that wiring and firing of, I better not be too different, has us resist change because we don't want to be different. It's actually dangerous to be different, but it's not actually true, right? So, I mean, to a degree, I'm sure you can be different enough where it is dangerous. Don't get me wrong.
There's always extremes.
Yeah, so knowing that's wired in all of us is like this resistance is something we come out of the womb with. Like it is actually in us. It's dangerous, right? So that's something where I realized it. The second thing I didn't necessarily understand is that you're forced into change. So just as you get older, you're forced to change.
Having children, forced to change.
Yeah, well, I would make the argument, when you're 80, you might have to be forced not to use stairs. You're forced into that change. I don't know if that's true. I actually want to dominate the stairs when I'm 80, but that's a different story.
Majority of people.
Correct. So like change is forced upon us. But I think the thing that really hit for me was like change is a skill. Like you can actually intentionally go about this. And if you bring this awareness to it, it can dramatically change your outcomes. And I got a great story of this from when I was golfing, of all things. All right, so I'm at the golf lesson. I'm like wanting to get better with my driver at this point here. I kept kind of like hitting the ball in was like a little bit of a hooky pattern, and I wanted to hit a fade pattern. And I get over the golf ball and I've got the driver in my hand, and like the guy's like, okay, well, I want you to move this here, do this, and then I want to hit your ball. And I'm doing his things, and I wind it back and I hit it. And he goes, how did that feel? I said, different. He said, good, because if it felt the same, you're doing it wrong. And I was like, I stopped for a moment and I'm like, that is really interesting. Like it's supposed to feel different.
Yeah.
So if you've gotten to a certain point in your business or you're investing and it's like things are starting to feel like different, awkward, unusual, that's a part of it. It should feel different. If it doesn't feel different, that should actually be a concern because you're just doing the same stuff. So I once I had this like epiphany of it. It's like, it's just like if I put my hand on a hot stove, it should feel hot, right? It's actually a good feedback loop that don't do that. Yeah. Or in this case here, do that. You should lean into that. So instead of things feeling like, again, in this golf example, it would be easy to go, that felt different. I'm going to go back to what I was doing. Intentionally leaning into it is something you can bring into business and investing too. I think this is where substantial returns exist also, because if what you want you don't have. So let's say you want to make an extra $1 million, but you don't have that today. Well, whatever you're doing isn't going to get you there. You're going to have to change something. You will need to change and be different to get that outcome.
And I think because we all have, whether it's really aware to us, we all have those feedback mechanisms, right? Which is a business that hits a glass ceiling where you go, oh, something needs to change here. Whether it's someone sitting there saying, does it feel different? It should feel different. I remember Tiger Woods, they timed him for every golf swing that he hit at the practice range. It was 7 minutes between each one because he was looking at what he needs to change. He was getting coaching on what he needs to change. And everyone sort of gets that, whether it's spoken or not spoken, but it's what people do with that information. And what I see a lot of people do is they will blame other things to avoid that change. It is, in my business, the reason I'm hitting a glass ceiling is because of my employees, because of the market, because of my customers. I can't charge more. All of these things where, no, it's actually just you're resisting change. The reason that I'm not making money is because interest rates are going up, or that inflation is around, or these things exist. And it's like, no, you're just resistant to change. You're resistant to thinking about how to solve the same problem in a different way. You are now looking at any other escape because it is easier than looking at yourself to make that change.
How many times have you seen this one? Let's say a business has got no employees. They get an employee and then everything changes. They have to manage someone. They're making less money because they're paying this, and then they go back.
Yeah, because it's easy, because it's comfortable, right? It's so much easier to stand in a warm shower than it is to turn it on to cold, right? But it doesn't mean that one's better than the other. That not having cold shower is better than having warm. I want to resist that change. I want to resist that pain. I want to, because I want to be on autopilot. I want to be normal. And this is why I love that quote of being comfortable with being uncomfortable, but also making the decisive choices to change. A lot of the times, to the point where I actually lean more into myself, where I will blame myself and look for things to improve myself for most of my situations, to the extreme. And it's actually done me a bit of a disservice, to be fair, where I am so supportive of change. It will actually, there have been times that this has done a disservice for me, where I have thought it was me that was the problem when it's actually a market, or it was actually something else influencing it. And I'm just I did not need to change. I'll go into the story that's at the top of my head. So I'm sitting in a boardroom, 7 other people who are mostly double my age at this time. I was about 25, 26. And I was looking at a business that had a $6 million sales pipeline. And I'm like, guys, this sales pipeline has not converted in 6 months, 9 months. I'm like, we need to start looking at raising some cash. This thing, it's just going to take time to convert. I'm like, I think they're all great opportunities. It's just going to take time to convert. 7 people came back. Grant, you do not understand this. I'm like, no. This, look at the trend. This is, no, Grant, you need to understand how these things work. And so I actually went away going, well, shit, what am I missing? Right. And I then started looking for things to change in myself, when in actual fact, 3 or 6 months later, they're like, you were right. And I'm like, oh shit. There are so many things where I overcorrected for this resistance to change, because I'm if I'm the same as everybody else, I'm going to do it bad. And so then I became so different, where I'm just oh, this is crazy. And then, this scenario then made me believe that I'm oh, wow. No, it's actually, now I'm too supportive of change, where I'm trying to change myself too much, when in actual fact there are other sort of situations in play.
You see this in plenty of areas as well, right? It's where someone finds a conspiracy theory that turns out to be true.
Yes.
And then they before you know it, they're one of those people that's was the moon landing real?
Yeah. And then, because they're so, what is it? So contrarian. They're so.
Yeah, and they become instantly wired to whatever anyone else is saying. Well, I'm not going to. Yeah, completely. But that's also what makes this so difficult, right? Is because there's truth in both of them. At times, you can very much be dealing with an environmental issue, or it could be a you issue. Mm. But I would say I don't think there's no advantage in sitting there and going, well, I'm just going to assume it's always the environment. Right. It's where I think developing yourself personally and working on some of your own skills and psychology that's within your control.
Hey, fellow business owner, if this topic and value-packed short video has resonated with you at all, and you want to dive deeper into being a full stack business owner, check out the full episode by clicking the link on your screen or in the description right now.